Okay. Again, I think the next 2 hours, again, having a break in between and questions in between, will be quite a challenge to give a better understanding, a thorough understanding about this reality today, which is representing just so much more than just a town, region being under rocket fire or threat. I think the first challenge is to get a few messages across. First, of explaining and understanding how today, as we said before, we became the front lines of undermining this legitimacy of Islamic terror, which is becoming more and more acceptable around the world. Experiencing, from my own experience, the imbalance of media coverage, how this has impacts on the Israel-Gaza conflict, experiencing how it became popular today to become anti-Israel, anti-Zionists in many parts of the region, many parts of the world, especially in campuses. I come out representing a human side of the story. How is it to be living in a rocket reality? And I come out fighting for my own legitimacy just to live in peace and security as a Jew and as Israeli. Being all the way to the Goldstone Committee this past July, exactly a year ago, giving a testimony in front of Goldstone and the UN judges, being on Capitol Hill, the Parliament House in Australia, going to South Africa, different countries in Africa. It's amazing how what's happening around the world, part of us explaining also about the spiritual war that we're talking about. Everything is connected to this region over here, having a reality today like no other place in the world, having rockets, missiles that are being fired and threatening civilian populations. And I'll be going over and over this concept of understanding how there is a reality today like no other place in the world, which somehow became acceptable, even in the Israeli society. And I'll be explaining why is it that we get, how did we actually give a legitimacy for this reality? And basically by us accepting this kind of reality, we're giving legitimacy for the ongoing rocket terror. And I can tell you from the experience again of when you give legitimacy for terrorism, this is what's opening up dark elements around the world. And again, I'll be talking about on the second part of this presentation today. I think the first aspect is to try explain and understand about this rocket reality, which has been getting 5 seconds rating in the Israeli news broadcast. I can just tell you in the past 6-7 years, the daily news broadcasts in Israel only are talking about how 2 Qassam rockets fell nearby Sderot, no injuries, no harm done, maybe 2 people treated for shock, into the weather report. And the question is to ask, being thousands of kilometers away from Israel, how do people get the information about the Middle East or about Israel? And what will you tell me is what we know today, being again thousands of kilometers away, is what we hear, what we see, what we read through the media elements. This is our perspective outside our own reality and what's so-called bubble. And the question is, can those 5 seconds of rating, only in the Israeli news broadcasts, can this give an understanding of having a region like no other place in the world where rockets, missiles are being fired and threatening its civilian populations? Can those 5 seconds of rating on the radio, can this give an understanding how this can be a very live reality? What could be happening to the entire center of Israel, beside a Palestinian state, on the West Bank, nothing to do with politics. It's a reality we have to take into consideration. This is again this is a controversial map that I like to use in front of diplomats and foreign press. I'll be explaining why I use this map. This is part of our training today to students and the younger generations. When we become accurate on the Sderot Gaza conflict, we get the basic of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which most Israelis today do not even know today. I'll be going very fast through the map, just showing where we are. Sderot is located right over here, okay? It's a 45-minute drive to Tel Aviv, which is the center of Israel. It's an hour and 15 to Jerusalem. Sderot in the southern part of Israel, the western Negev, has been under rocket fire for the past 9 years. This coming October, is going to be 10 years being under rocket fire and threat. As we speak today, again, those 5 seconds of rating, if I ask you the most basic question, How many rockets do you think have been fired from Gaza towards Israel since the end of the operation in Gaza, which ended on the 18th of January 2009? We're talking about a year, 18 months. How many rockets do you think have been fired from Gaza towards Israel? Does anyone here have any idea from what you've been listening to or hearing through media elements? Yeah? 400. Okay, well, more or less. That's a good guess. Anybody else? Well, the accurate number is, I'll just be answering it. 1,400, thank you. Well, the accurate number is 360 run rockets that have been fired from Gaza towards Israel. This is our third ceasefire between Hamas and Israel in the past 3 years, having hundreds of rocket attacks during the ceasefires. I could hear clearly by experience, by living in Sderot for the past 4 years under rocket fire and threat, that the quieter it gets in our region, the more dangerous it's going to be coming in the very near future. Now, the first lesson that they say in criminology is silence. And the quieter it gets, again, compared this year to almost any other year, 2008, it's been over 3,200 rockets, missiles, mortars being fired towards Israel. Having these 360-run rockets, there's nothing even to compare it to. But again, we all know very clearly that the quieter it gets, the more dangerous the scenario is going to be all around the southern western part of Israel. I think the second part of the presentation, after describing and explaining this part of the story, is to explain how what will be happening in this part of the region would have a direct impact right over here, literally over here in Norway and around the world. And that's a direct message of understanding what we're up against. As we're saying, this is the only, today, in terms of conflict, this is the only humanitarian aspect that we have today to represent as the Israeli perspective, showing how we're still the victim in this conflict. At the same time, when we're competing with multi-million-dollar campaigns coming out from Gaza, which today became the tops of the cream of the Palestinian narrative, the Palestinian PR, understanding what is Hamas, the definition of terrorism. These most basic definitions are not understood today to anyone, and we'll be going over these basic things of understanding, and I'll be explaining literally how that the next conflict would have a direct impact over here and literally around the world. I think the second aspect that we'll be trying to talk about later on is basically questioning our basic Jewish and Christian identity and answering it with the miraculous Sderot story. What we're talking about this spiritual war that we're talking about, I can just tell you by experiencing live coincidences or luck or miracles happening in this part of the region, which is very hard to be explaining. You know very clearly that there's a reason why this is actually happening and what this is actually answering for me today as a Jew and as Israeli, trying to reach the root of the problem, the root of the conflict, representing this side of the story. I can just tell you that going around campuses in Canada a couple of months ago, as I told you, coming out fighting for my own legitimacy, just to live as a Jew and as Israeli, I was able to come across to pro-Palestinians and to Israel critics by getting to the root of the problem, talking about our legitimacy just to live today in the state of Israel. So there's many topics here to be explaining, many messages coming out from this region. As I try to explain right now that this topic is very much relevant, having again the last direct hit into Sderot's industrial area zone this past Friday, right before I left. And as we all know clearly that the rocket reality is coming back. And what Gaza has become, I'll be saying this over and over, Gaza today is the only Arab territory in the Middle East being controlled by all means by the radical Islam. And what this means is critical for the entire Middle East, for the entire world. So this is part of the importance of explaining of how to be living in those shadows. I think the first challenge to get people in understanding how to be living in a rocket reality, I think the first challenge right now in the presentation is to give this description of how to be living in Sderot. And just to explain very clearly that Sderot is less than 1 kilometer away from the northern part of Gaza. It just means that once a rocket is being fired from Gaza towards Sderot, you have 15 seconds or less to run for your life. How to express to anyone about having those 15 seconds? How do you explain to anyone about a rocket exploding nearby? This became the challenge to get only this part of the story across. Again, having those 5 seconds of rating on the Israeli news broadcast, this cannot give an understanding how is it to be living in a unique rocket reality today like no other place in the world. So I'll be showing to you right now is a very short video that we put together calling it the 15 seconds. The purpose of this video is to get this feeling across, a sense of understanding of what does it mean to have those 15 seconds to run for your life. You can just imagine sitting like this in a hall room or any other place, waiting to hear the siren going off. And you expect to run through the corridors and hoping to reach a secured room less than 15 seconds. That's almost impossible to imagine or to understand. But that somehow became part of the daily routine life, living in this part of the country, this region, in this part of the world. Many of the scenes that you'll be seeing in this short video, scenes we're able to capture live by living in Sderot, capturing almost every single angle of this devastation, this rocket reality. Filming 2 years ago, children on their first day of school. When the children were on the way to school, we knew something very well was going to be happening on that first day of school. While the children on the way to school, the sirens started going off. The siren is a loudspeaker with a woman's voice saying "Tseva Adom," the color red, basically alerting you having 15 seconds. And we filmed having the sirens going off that morning and having like 7 explosions into the town. We literally filmed the children running for their lives into the schools itself. This was broadcast around the world. And even in Israel, it was the first time the newspapers wrote about what does it mean to have those 15 seconds or less to run for your life. So let me just share this short video to get the sense of feeling of understanding what does it mean to be under rocket fire. Okay, that was the 15 seconds. This is when I start all over again, once I get everybody's attention. Hello, my name is Noam Bedein. I moved to Sderot around 4 years ago. I've experienced over 3,000 rockets that have been fired towards my town. And as I said, this is a growing challenge just to represent this side of the story. And it's a growing challenge representing a psychological impact and seeing the results of not getting a balanced understanding around the world. The worse is actually impacting the rocket reality, and the more it's influencing people all the way over here, getting only one side of the story getting across. I tell people when I moved to Sderot 4 years ago, at the time, I moved to Sderot just to become a student. There's a big communication college right outside of Sderot called Sapir, and I became a student for that college. And I tell people that I became a student for Sderot, experiencing rockets and missiles exploding into the town. And at the time, there's no public office or any governmental office or even press center to speak out for the residents, to express and to experience how's it to be living in a rocket reality. And on that concept, I've established a Sderot Media Center to become a voice and face of the region, to be expressing this side of the story with a challenge, giving people around the world a balanced understanding to the Gaza narrative. As I told you, this is a growing challenge when we're competing with literally multi-million-dollar campaigns in Gaza, being the only ones today in the Negev representing professionally outside of the country. On a daily basis, we host diplomats, foreign press, embassies, student groups, Christian groups, humanitarian groups coming from around the world, hosting them in Sderot with the purpose to try representing, again, this human side of the story of the rocket reality. I tell people that when I moved to Sderot, I went around the community for a month and a half to get a formal and professional understanding about this rocket reality. And I tell people that when I arrive to the security officer's office, I walk into his office and I see on a wall a map of Sderot with dots indicating where these rockets have exploded. The security officer was telling me how that 6 years ago, he stopped putting dots on this map because he wants to notice there's a map of Sderot. And it's just basically understanding that every single road, every single street, every single community, neighborhood, family, and child has experienced a rocket explode nearby. I can tell you from experience that once you've experienced a rocket explode nearby, your life has completely changed from that moment. What goes through your mind almost every single day when you leave your doorstep, even today, is when and where the siren is going to go off, where is it going to catch you, if you'll have enough time to run for shelter, and where the rocket is going to explode. And you try expressing to people that once you've experienced a rocket explode nearby, the next time you hear the siren, Tseva Adom, the color red, going off, it does not matter for residents of Sderot if a rocket explodes into the town or outside of the town. You're sure the rocket is aiming right towards you, and you have those 15 seconds or less to run for your life. And this actually became normal in this town and not normal any other place in the country or in the world. Those daily routine lives, living before and after rocket attacks. And that human part of the story, this is what we are trying to represent today outside of the world, those daily routine lives. For instance, my experience moving to Sderot was waking up almost every single morning with a collective alarm clock. We would have the sirens going off from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the morning, followed by an explosion. When you're thinking how these are the times that children are on the way to the kindergartens, to schools, parents on the way to shop, to work, those were the times you'd have directed into Sderot. Mothers would tell me that when they go back to the schools to get their children around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they should be expecting an incoming rocket. There's a lot of coordination with the timings of the rockets, if it's first thing in the morning, before the holidays, before the Shabbat, the Sabbath, before the television news broadcast. When Hamas takes in charge, you could definitely know when they want to strike right before the news broadcast, because when there's a direct hit into Sderot, you have the entire television news, Israeli news broadcasts, go exactly to the scene, and that's how whoever's watching the television news would be horrified with terrorism around the country. What became normal, by just driving into Sderot, you have the routine of putting down your window shield of the car, turning off your music in the car, taking off your seatbelt, because you're always alert to jump out of the car. Hearing literally a mother a couple months ago telling me that while she was driving around the town, the siren went off. She jumped out of her car and she went to her back seat, needing to choose what child to grab on first so she could run as close as she can towards a wall, towards a shelter. If you just drive around Sderot, you see bomb shelters scattered next to the central bus station, next to the marketplace, next to the high schools, next to the schools, next to the playgrounds. As a photojournalist, we try capturing different moments and elements in just one photograph. When you picture a playground and a bomb shelter in one photograph, you understand how this reality is completely unique and unacceptable in the entire world. When we understand how this is a unique reality, this is bringing up the basic questions. Let me ask you. You tell me, would any other Western democracy in the world would tolerate even one rocket being fired towards a territory? And the fact that we are is understanding there's a much deeper level of understanding on the ground what is really going on and the rules of the games today, what we're dealing with. I'll be talking about the experience of testifying in front of Goldstone, having half an hour to present 80 years being under rocket fire. How the heck do you do that? It's almost impossible. I'll be explaining how I ended the presentation is getting to that point itself, that we're depending on the world public opinion for Israel today to do what is right for their own people and protect their own citizens. If I just break it down, the numbers, okay, just very fast. Overall, for the past 9 years, it's been 12,000 rockets. Over the past, this coming August is going to be 5 years ever since Israel has disengaged from the Gaza Strip, taking out the Jewish communities in the Israeli army bases. Israel, by the way, is the only country in modern history that ever gave land for peace after winning a war. And since that point until today, 8,000 rockets have been fired towards Israel. We have today the Iran factor in Sderot's backyard. People here are talking about, what about Iran? What about Iran? We have Iran in Sderot's backyard. And third, the missiles have tripled how far they can actually reach. 2 years ago, quoting the Intelligence and Terrorism Information Center, what Hamas was capable of doing in the past 2 years since the disengagement, it took any terror militia in the world 20 years